it's important to look at things in a new way if we can. It's not always very easy to look at things in a new way because we get very stuck in the old way. It's like a groove. If you make a groove in a wooden table by repeatedly gouging it with some thing, eventually the groove gets so deep that we can't get out of it. And that's a very handy way of looking at our way of relating to the world, our mental perspective on things. When we look at things, we look at them through well-worn grooves. So we want to get out of those grooves if we can. So today what I'd like to try out is looking at mental health disturbances in a new way. So to start off with, the premise that we're going to take, and it doesn't really matter what you think about this premise. It could be true, it could be untrue, it could be likely, it could be unlikely. The whole idea of an exercise like this is just to take the premise consciously without developing any attachment to it, and then just run with it and see where it goes. So the premise is that the universe is a total enigma, as Umberto Eco says. It's a complete enigma because no matter how much you peel it back, there's only ever going to be more enigma behind the levels. And it just goes on getting more and more enigmatic. So for a start, this isn't a very easy thing for us to get to grips with because we like to have an end in the process where we can uncover some kind of truth and then rest assured in the truthfulness of our so-called truth. It's kind of like getting tired and wanting to sit down. We want a comfortable armchair to sit in. So, at last I've got a comfortable armchair. And in this type of armchair where you're looking at things in a particular way, it's kind of like an armchair you never get out of because it's so comfortable you sink into it and it kind of swallows you up. And then you think that being in the armchair is all that there is. That's the only way of existing. You don't realise you could get up out of that armchair, which is admittedly difficult because you have to boost yourself up out of it, on the arms of it, and it's kind of sucking you the whole time, so it's a hard thing to do. But anyway, it's not our favourite way of looking at things, but it's a good way. It's fruitful. So supposing the universe is just pure enigma, what do we do in the face of this enigma? Umberto Eco suggests that what we do is we try to solve it, make sense of it, figure it out. And when we do this, this becomes a painful thing for us because we can't work it out and we're trying to work it out. So it drives us round the bend, really, according to Umberto Eco. It drives us cracked because we're trying to do something we can't do. So he says that the enigma is harmless if we just let it be what it is, an enigma, and respect the enigmatic nature of the enigma. Then we're okay. We're not trying to make it be anything it isn't. But when we try and do something with it, then that's where all the trouble starts. And so, although the enigma of the universe is harmless, it's not so harmless if we aren't content to let it be. So straight away, this gives us a way of looking at the mental health disturbances. For example, could start off with OCD. As we know, OCD is an attempt to arrive at some kind of ideal picture of things, or to arrange the world in an ideal way, i.e. in a non-enigmatic way. So we're doing violence to the enigma. We're trying to be absolutely certain about stuff. I want to know 100% that I did this, or that this is right, or that this happened, or that I'm looking for 100% certainty. So as we all know, that when we're in the grip of OCD, we're looking for something we can't get, and it takes up an awful lot of our time, and it's exhausting, gets in the way of everything else, and even after that it still doesn't work. It just leaves us feeling really disturbed, because what we really want to obtain, and it matters so much to us, it's not just a matter of interest or passing the time. It really, really is so important to arrive at this certainty, to obtain this certainty. And the more we try to reach the certainty, the more important it becomes for us, and the more frightening the possibility of not obtaining it becomes. So that's OCD, no matter which particular way that condition may manifest. That's what it comes down to. We're not respecting the enigmaticness of the cosmic enigma at all. We want to bring order to it. And anxiety isn't too far away from that either, because in anxiety, we still want to know stuff for sure. We want to know that things are going to happen in the right way and not the wrong way, which is the core of anxiety. If I knew absolutely that things were going to happen the right way, then I wouldn't be anxious. What's to be anxious about? But the thing is that when we are suffering from anxiety, it's because we have an inkling that we don't actually, there's no way to know if things are going to happen in the right, inverted commas, way or not. You can never foretell that. There's no certainty there, there's no security there. And so what we do in response to this uncertainty is we accelerate mental activity to try and find a way to make sure that the bad thing doesn't happen, the unwanted outcome doesn't happen. We accelerate our attempts to figure a way around this glitch. But there is no way around it. If there was, then one day I'd work out what it was, and then my anxiety would be at an end, because I've worked out how to control 100% effectively. In the enigmatic universe, the idea of controlling 100% effectively is completely unattainable. It's an utter absurdity. For a start, I don't know what the right way is. I don't know what's right and what's wrong, because it's all too enigmatic. So even to have the goal is impossible. And then with control, what we have two things. We have the goal, and we have our rule-based procedure for obtaining that goal in a predictable way, in a reliable way. And that's not possible either, because stuff ain't reliable in the enigmatic universe. It's too enigmatic for that. So we're going the opposite way. We're trying to get the great enigma to be what it isn't, and it's shredding us. It really does shred us. It's like a carrot being shredded on a grater. That's what happens when we try and go against the enigma. It always happens. The enigma always prevails, because the enigma is what reality is and what we want to happen, the type of order we're trying to project on it. That's what isn't, but what we would like to be, in our short-sighted kind of a way. And the reason I say short-sighted is because we haven't really thought it out properly, because even if we could control absolutely effectively and get things to be exactly the way we want them to be, that wouldn't be a lot of fun, actually, because that's like digging a grave for yourself. That's the end of everything. That's like making everything so final that nothing ever changes, and then what's the point? You've somehow defeated the whole point of life. Why would you want to defeat the whole point of life? But actually you can't defeat the whole point of life, because life continues. So even though we can impose our order on life for a while, eventually its true nature reasserts itself, and we realize that all the structures, whether it's physical structures or mental structures, beliefs we've tried to erect, are going to crumble, because they've all been built on shifting sand. So I started with OCD and anxiety because they're pretty similar and they're almost the same thing. But we can move on to other mental disturbances which aren't so easy or obviously portrayed in this particular paradigm. So one thing we could talk about is depression. Depression is different to anxiety and OCD. It's not anxious. It's not active. It's not trying to achieve anything. There's no striving towards some sort of goal, real or unreal, possible or impossible. So it's of a different type. It's a different species of thing, but it still fits into this model. Because what we do in practice is, because of our distaste for the great enigma, we create life along different lines. So we create a non-enigmatic life, and we live that life, and we deny the enigma. It's like the devil. It's like Satan. We banish it, keep it out, fight against it, forget about it if at all possible. Forgetting about it is what we really want to do. And for most of us, it really is true that we do forget about it very, very effectively indeed. Of course we do. We don't go around worrying about the enigma or thinking about the enigma. We think about lots of things. You might be worrying about lots of things, but not about the enigma. It doesn't figure. As far as we're concerned, this is a non-enigmatic universe, a rational universe, a universe that makes sense. We all live in a universe that makes sense. Of course we do. So what have we done? We've created our own virtual reality that is different to actual reality. Actual reality is enigmatic. Our virtual reality that we live in is profoundly non-enigmatic. Stuff just is what it is. You get whatever it says on the label, that's what you get. No surprises. No surprises there. We keep on opening these jars, and what's in the jar is always exactly what it says on the label. Isn't that great? Now, there's a downside to this. Even though we all do it, almost all of us do it, and we seem to do it very effectively. And the downside is that we've had to disconnect reality. We've had to shut ourselves off, insulate ourselves from the way things really are, and make do with a make-believe reality instead. We've become alienated from reality, disconnected from reality. The relationship has become very bad. We're not talking. Really bad relationship. Because we don't like the great enigma. We don't like it. So clearly, what the downside of that is that the life we're actually living isn't real. But that's not necessarily a downside, because if we could see that, then it wouldn't be a problem. But it isn't real and we think it's real. We don't know that there's anything missing. We don't know that we're just living in a sham version. If we did, that'd be okay, but we don't. So what that means is to live in an unreal reality that we think is real means that everything is actually secretly meaningless, even though we're so up close to it all that it seems meaningful. If we could step back, or if we could somehow gain an overall picture of what's happening, we'd realize that nothing's happening, that it's all meaningless. So there's a lack of meaning, which Jung calls a soul sickness somewhere. He says that's soul sickness, total lack of meaning, total lack of authenticity. And we don't know about it. We don't know it's lacking in meaning. We don't know that it's inauthentic. So that awareness does come to us, but it comes to us from an unsuspected quarter in a way that we can't really appreciate. And the way it comes is through losing our appetite for the things that we normally enjoy and find meaningful. It's like some deadly poison has got in. That's, as Gurdjieff says, has spoiled our appetite for our favourite dish. So we can just imagine that there we are, there I am, waiting for my favourite dish, and it's going to be a real treat because it's absolutely what I like the most, and I'm sitting there at the table and the dish arrives. Maybe I'm in a fancy restaurant and the waiter brings it, and then there's the dish and it does nothing for me. I eat a bit, it's tasteless, I have nothing. So on the one hand, I'm not getting anything out of it, and on the other hand, there's this state of shock. My favourite dish, which kind of says something about me, it's like my favourite dish, it's my favourite thing, doesn't do anything anymore. So what does that say? What does that say about my life? If my favourite thing doesn't even mean anything, what about the rest of it? That isn't even my favourite. So that's a pretty appalling thing. We've lost something that seems to be so vital. So that's overt meaning loss. And it seems like a pathological process, as I've said, because it seems to set in and destroy everything. So we'd all agree that depression is a pathological process. Most of us would agree. Alchemists wouldn't agree, but most of us would agree. And if I'm suffering from depression, I would agree, because it feels so very, very bad. It's more bad than I know how to explain. It's bad on such a deep level. Therefore, it's got to be pathological, right? If you come up to me and try and tell me it isn't pathological, it isn't a sickness, I'm not going to be very amused with you. I'm not going to have much time for you. But actually, if we're looking at it in this way, it's not like a sickness, because it's actually the truth. I'm starting to see that my unreal world is unreal, and that the meaningless activities which I fill my life with are actually meaningless activities. So although it manifests as a pervasive sickness that gradually takes away everything I've got was this kind of made-up delusion that I was using to shield myself from seeing reality in this model. So in that case, we can't say it's pathological. It's a healthy process. The thing is that healthy processes, psychologically speaking, are not easy. What's easy is the unhealthy. The healthy processes are the worst. We don't want mental health. We don't want to gravitate towards it. We don't want anything to do with it, because it is very, very challenging. Because mental health, another way of saying mental health is just to say it's a relationship with the truth of how things actually are. And as we have already said, we don't like the way things are. We really, really don't want to have anything to do with that. But the problem isn't in the way things are. The problem is in my attitude, obviously. The problem is in my fundamental rejection of the way things are. So although I am suffering more than I would ever have known it was possible to suffer, I'm suffering from my attitude, not from life itself. Life isn't really punishing me, even though it absolutely does feel that it is. And if somehow I could have that awareness come to me, I would see it's me that's causing this pain, not life, not the universe, not reality. And it is actually possible to have these two things at the same time, to have this terrible pain and the feeling that everything is so wrong, and yet simultaneously, if there is that awareness there, to see nothing's wrong at all, everything's fine, I've just got it all backwards. That's a way of looking at depression. We create virtual realities, we create hyper-reality, we create our own type of reality that suits us. And when it falls apart, as it eventually will, because it's an artificial situation that has to be maintained, and even when we maintain it really well, it's going to reach a point where we can't maintain it, because all forms come into existence and hang around a bit, and then they go again. All forms, all structures, all artificial structures, all structures are artificial. That's how it is with everything. So whatever fun we might have during the euphoric phase where we're able to believe in it and we've banished any awareness of the enigma, the other stage is exactly counterbalancing that in terms of despair and having a terrible time. It's not possible to have that euphoria without paying for it. Anyone that's been majorly into euphoric drugs, and that's kind of a lot of us really, would know that. That's what you learn from taking stuff like the euphoric drugs, cocaine, amphetamine, alcohol, ecstasy. We know that what goes up comes down. So what glorifies the ego at one stage will do the exact opposite in the second stage, and that's fine. That's balancing the books. That's how it works. You can't have an ego that gets a false sense of self that gets glorified forever, unfortunately. We'd like to. Then again, that's probably quite short-sighted of us to want that. But that's what we would like, even though we don't consciously necessarily know that that's what we want, or that that is what we think mental health is. So we can go through the entire neurotic spectrum in exactly that way, because all neurotic conditions are about our last-ditch attempt to have control and certainty when we can't. They're all holding on, in other words. We all hold on all the time, and that's fine. But there comes a time when what we're holding on to, we lose. And that's the painful bit. If we could give it away, if we could let go of it, that'd be fine. But we don't want it. It's happening against our will. It's been taken off us against our will. And we're kind of kicking and screaming every inch of the way. So then the next thing to consider is the psychotic mental disturbances, which are very different from the neurotic ones. And what we can say about the psychotic mental disturbances very clearly is it all comes down to trying to make sense of the world, trying to make sense of the enigma. Normally we don't have to work too hard to do this because we are granted that capacity to insulate ourselves from reality. We can do that. That's our superpower, in fact. But it can happen that the enigma becomes too potent for us to deny. And our normal way of seeing the world just can't explain it anymore. Our normal theories. So we have to stretch our theories and develop ever more extreme and bizarre theories or beliefs to account for the phenomena that we're experiencing. And so this brings us into the territory of psychosis and the territory of paranoia, which I will talk about in the next installment.